Welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Thanks for joining me. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the soon to be released medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times. Thus, the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. And yes, I was clinically dead 20 times. As you might expect, all that dying can change one's life perspective. The Dead Man Walking podcast is going to highlight a number of these issues that have become very important to me. Now, if it looks like I might be reading from a script, it's because all of this dying has done a number on my memory. So I'll just ask you to please do me a favor, pretend it doesn't look like I'm reading from a script, and I'll pretend I'm not reading from a script. It'll be good for the rest of the podcast. I've had a lot of help getting my memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, due out in March of 2023, to the finish line. Consequently, I'd like to support other writers in reaching their goals. And today I'm excited to hear one of our emerging authors has going on. Bella Lucia, welcome to the Emerging Authors edition of the Dead Man Walking podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Fred. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. How brutal was that intro?
Not so bad at all. No, no. And I appreciate you in light of your memoir coming out, creating this opportunity for me and other authors to share with your audience, and of course our audiences too, what we're working on, what we have coming. It's very generous of you to open up that door for other people. And I appreciate being one of those people who
My
you're
pleasure.
giving a hand to. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. I see you brought your fan club with you.
I did. I did. Yeah, I had two backgrounds. I was debating. I
Mhm.
have one of my posse and I have one of my illustrations of these characters. I actually have the main character of my series with me here now, Bella Elephant. So I have the actual stuffy version with me as well.
So that's funny because one of the author Wheel of Mystery questions that we have is if somebody gave you an elephant, what would you do with it?
Well,
I guess we know.
ironically, yes, yes. Well, ironically, I chose an elephant to be part because when I first started my business, I didn't know I was going to write a children's series. I honestly did not know that. I what I had when I first started is I had a series of characters which I already created, and I fine-tuned it based on knowledge I had because I'm from a family of teachers, some basic knowledge, and also just observing the world of toddlers and children. What animals do we constantly see? What animals are my friends gravitating towards? Are their children gravitating towards? And elephants are a big one. And the elephant
Literally.
actually wasn't yeah, no, exactly. And elephants weren't one of the main characters. Originally it was bears. Originally I was drawn towards my teddy bear characters. I thought they would be the lead because I named them after my grandparents. But I noticed that people were gravitating towards the male and the female versions of the elephants I created. Again, you don't fight your audience, you go with your audience to a certain
Right.
degree. And elephants are a good omen. They're a good sign. And ironically, the last formal job I had, my cubicle was in the front of our row, and I actually still have this little statue in my apartment right now.
Mhm.
There was this elephant. I don't know how we found it, whose it was originally, but we put it on top of my cubicle because it has this trunk raised, and again, it's a
Mhm.
sign of great omen. So I luckily, when I was laid off from my job, I was able to take that little figure home. So when I created Bella and Ezra and the other characters, Bella kind of became the front runner for various reasons, but the fact that she was an elephant did feel very near and dear to me, understanding that many cultures, many
Mhm.
nationalities do see it as a good omen. So it felt like a good step forward, like having her as the main character.
Mhm. So you actually have crocheted all these characters yourself, right?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I crochet and I create the patterns as well. I have my own nuances. Like when you first start, you use other people, use patterns when you're learning.
Mhm.
And then as you do that, you start learning like, oh, I want to do this, or oh, I want to do that, or let me try out this. Bella is and Ezra, that's the boy elephant's name.
Mhm.
Those were, in all honesty, those are my probably my first. I would say those are my first two stuffies where I created from scratch, where I really was like, okay, I just sat down and created. Like, I always joke that the first elephant I ever created, these ears, it took me 4 hours to create one ear because I
Hmm.
kept on creating it and taking it apart, trying to find the right medium, trying to find the right balance. So
Hmm.
it's it definitely was an interesting feat. And then when I got to the puppies again, that's another one where I created that from scratch as well. And that was a little more of a that I feel like that came together a little quicker, but I definitely remember that about the elephants. Like the trunk came together well, like the head came together well, but the
Hmm.
ears, I'm telling you, the ears were a killer. The ears were where I was like, it's too big, it doesn't look right. Like, and I just remember a
Hmm.
movie being on and me like pulling the ear apart and putting it back together. And like it took me a couple tries, but then I like it clicked and it was that moment. And it was the same thing with
Hmm.
my book series too. It was something that was boiling in me, something that I knew I needed to write, but I didn't know what about. And it was through working on my messaging that I realized, okay, it's going to be a children's series. And then through identifying it was a children's series and starting to write it, and through my own healing work, it became clear that Bella needed to be the main character of all the books. Because originally I was like, okay, I'm going to have this many books in this series, and this many is going to be about this character, and then this character, and this character. And I realized, no, I need to focus it all on Bella.
Hmm.
And the beauty of Bella is that the name originally came from my friend's little girl, who's Isabella. And I named the original Lovey after her. And Bella's been my nickname for a very long time, but it felt narcissistic and it didn't feel right to come out right away and say, this is me. Like I felt like, oh no, this is kind of like a private nickname. Like, although many people call me that, like I don't want to
Hmm.
broadcast it. And as I started writing and illustrating the first book, and the deeper I got into the next books of the series, I realized, oh my gosh, this is me. Not only is it my nickname, but like I'm writing about myself. So I actually realized my friend's little girl actually helped me identify with my inner child, actually helped me take ownership of something that I was scared to, something that was like, oh no, 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 I can't say
Hmm.
that. That's inappropriate. But I realized, no, I need to embrace this. And that also helped breathe life into the series, into the books I'm writing right now. Ironically, my first book is coming out in spring 2023 as well. So when you announced that in your intro, I was like, oh my gosh, me too. And like it was that beautiful moment of a sign. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm very grateful for you to give me this opportunity to share my story with you and your audience. It really is a blessing.
So, speaking of signs, I read a couple of
Yes.
things in your very, very long bio, and um, I there these things that were a little mysterious to me because you didn't really elaborate on them.
Mhm.
Uh, you alluded to an injury,
Mhm.
and then you had a sign from your mom, and that's
Yeah.
sort of what got this entire ball rolling. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. So in 2018, I'm a dancer. I am a competitive Latin dancer. And in addition to my Latin dancing, I also practice ballet. And I was in my ballet class and I was taking a grand jeté, which is a large leap. And I landed and I thought the floor broke and it was me. I went to City MD. I'm located in New York City. So I went to urgent care and they diagnosed it almost immediately. They said, we believe you ruptured you did something to your Achilles tendon. And it was really scary. It was, and so I was immediately put in a cast. I was immediately put on crutches. Within a week, I had the MRI. Within a week, I was diagnosed with a rupture. Within a week, I had surgery. And for anyone in the audience that's had an injury like an Achilles tendon, it forces you to slow down. So I had to go on medical leave from my corporate job. I couldn't dance, which was even more painful. And I'm
Mhm.
stuck in this boot and I'm stuck on the sofa. And luckily, I already started learning to crochet a year prior. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to start working on other projects. But while think about crochet, and it's very similar to coloring, which is a gift I have for your audience. Actually,
Mhm.
I have a freebie coloring drawing, which I will share the link with you after this
Fantastic.
recording, so you can put that. Yeah, no, I'd love to share that. So crocheting, like coloring, it's very meditative. and it frees up your mind and it gives you time to think. And I'm now a knitter as well. I knit as well. And knitting does the same thing for us, those three activities. And so I offer coloring to audiences and to people that follow me and that will follow you, that are following you. Because if you can say, oh, well, crochet is complicated. Oh, well, knitting's complicated, but coloring isn't. Anyone can
Mhm.
color. It's a very, any age level, it doesn't matter. It's amazingly accessible. But anyway, but to my point, I started thinking, and my friend came over and said, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep working in corporate and doing all your creative things. Like, you're a creative, you have to own this. And
Mhm.
that started my career pivot. I started networking while I was in the boot and crutches. Literally the week after I got my boot, right before I went back to my job, I met my career coach, Matilda, and we
Mhm.
started talking about my rocket ship. And that started my path with her of developing my pivot, networking, etc. Fast forward a year later, 2019, I got laid off from my job. Luckily, I was already in the midst of networking, and I went for an interview, which I networked my way into, which is amazing.
Mhm.
And I walked out, I was like, I can't do this again. And I went back to my coach, Matilda. We were in a WeWork conference room and I was fumbling and I announced, I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur. She said, I agree. I was like, all right, what do I do? And I remember I went on vacation and I came back and I started pitching this business. It wasn't where it is right now. Originally, it was just characters I created. And I tell stories of the characters, very broad, like just throwing it out there, seeing how people react. And I had another idea too that I was pitching. And I started getting bites on this. Now, within those weeks of me doing this, those very early weeks, I got a phone call that my mom, from one of my family members, that our mom was really sick. My mom was diagnosed with lung cancer and within a week passed. And the day she passed, I was back here in New York. I'm actually from Massachusetts originally. And that day, I got the first piece of mail addressed to my company. The night I found out she was ill, I got this urge, which I swear was my grandma, to file for my LLC. And the day she passed was the day I got that piece of mail saying my LLC was approved. And I knew it was her and my grandma telling me I need to pursue this business. So in those early days, when people were telling me it was just the characters, people are telling me, well, it might be too expensive to make them, or it may not work, or blah blah blah. You're putting a lot of emphasis in this, and I
Mhm.
held my ground, and I said, no, these characters are going to lead me to the answers. They're going to lead me. Maybe they will go away, maybe they won't go away, but either way, they're going to lead me to something bigger than them. And that's exactly what they did. Through the characters, I stopped blogging. And through blogging, I met another messaging strategist, and that made me realize I needed to write my children's series. And through writing my children's series, it led me to where I am presently with my editor, Susan, and with my marketing strategist, Melanie. And that's led me to being on podcasts right now. And that's made me to realize, okay, self-publishing is the right route for me. And it's also led me to my mission, that through my healing work and through this process, I realized that these books are about sharing tools of communication with both children and their parents.
Mhm.
And it's about making things accessible. And I do the illustrations for my books as well. I can actually shift, if you don't mind. I'll shift to my other background so you
Sure.
and your audience can get a taste of my artwork. So these are some portraits I've created of my posse.
Mhm.
So the crochet stuffed animals you saw, unfortunately, I realize it's backwards, the writing, but
Mhm.
that's some of my watercolor work. I do all my illustrations in watercolor. And I felt very strongly about illustrating my books because I am an artist. And when you're an
Mhm.
artist, only you can really know your true voice. And also, I wanted to demonstrate for all the children out there that are artists, that are creators, and are wondering, how do I make a living off of this? How do I create this? Like, how do I make this happen? Also for those parents, I see so many women and men in my world that have kids that are me, that are just like me, that are
Mhm.
artists, are creatives, and you're like, how do I do this? Like, how do I steer my child so they're able to pay their rent? And I feel this responsibility because now that I'm old enough and to do my own healing, like I see my parents' fear in them. Like, I see, oh gosh, that's what mom and dad were going through all those years. Like, neither of my parents are artists, and I'm kind of a black sheep. I kind of threw them for a loop. And so I see these books as a platform to provide tools for fuller communication with your children and also your family members around you, your spouses, your brothers, your sisters, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we can communicate more effectively, we can tap into our feelings. And by tapping into our feelings, we're able to relate, and we're able to relate on a very humane level. And that's a really, really beautiful thing.
Mhm. So basically, this is all going according to plan. It's like you had this mapped out in the stars
Yeah.
the time you were born.
Yeah. It really was. That was always my dream as a little girl, was to be a Disney artist. Walt Disney was the
Mhm.
first artist that really inspired me and that really solidified, like, I want to do that. Like, it gave me like a North Star moment.
Mhm.
And as I developed my vision as an adult, and the more I realized, gosh, I can't keep living this double life, it did expand that. So it has
Mhm.
expanded to include Chuck Jones, who is the creator of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. It's
Mhm.
also expanded to include the ever so famous Dr. Seuss, Ted Geisel.
Mhm.
But the man that actually tied the boat on it for me, and it solidified the real mission beyond the art and the writing, is Fred Rogers. I watched his documentary and I saw what he was doing. I finally saw the strategy behind him and how it was all about communication, and it was all about giving us space to work from our feelings. And the more I write my books and the more I talk about it on podcasts to hosts like you and others, the more I realize that when we strip away our genders, our religions, our sexual orientations, our nationalities, et cetera, where we're located in the world geographically, we all work from the same feelings list. And another element too is the age element. It doesn't matter if you're 3 year olds, 13 years old, 33 years old, 73 years old. Going like my favorite song, it's gonna be really silly right now. My favorite Christmas song of all time, because I'm Catholic, I'm a Christian woman, is Nat King Cole's The Christmas Song. And
Mhm.
to quote those beautiful lyrics, whether you're from children from 1 to 92, we all work from the same feelings list. And if we're able to step back and focus on the feelings, we're going to be able to communicate so much more effectively. And that's what Fred Rogers got from the very beginning. And I believe that's part of the reason why his series was so effective and so successful, even all these years later. And my dream is to be number 5 on that list. My dream
Mhm.
is to be able to stand with those 4 men and showcase that. And the more I work through my personal healing, the more I develop this, it also is bigger than just me. I am an aunt, I am a godmother, I want to be a mom myself. And you realize too, when you're in these journeys, that it's not just about you anymore. There's other people that need this as well. And you have that responsibility. When you have that responsibility, it makes it so much bigger and more,
Mhm.
enhances it so much. And it's really a beautiful thing.
So it's interesting you brought up Fred Rogers.
Yeah.
When his documentary came out, I'd somehow become friendly with a group of about 6 people, all from the former Soviet Union. And we went to see the documentary, and they had no idea who Fred Rogers was. They've never seen a series of anything like that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, they were all just like, wow, this guy's a genius. This guy is like unlike anything we've ever seen. And it's too
Yeah.
bad we haven't seen him, you know, 30 years before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of my favorite parts of the documentary is where he's at Congress, and there's all the fighting and all the bickering, and before he even starts, he asks the speaker, may I please, do I have permission to read this? Like, he acknowledges the space.
Mhm.
And he said, in the way, his tone he uses too, and this is something that I'm developing now when I talk to people. One of my perfect example for me, for that I can share with your audience, is one of Actually, I share two examples. I'll share it with a child experience I have with a child, experience I had with a family member. One of my family members and I had a beautiful heart to heart. And when I was sharing something that hurt me, I said it like I'm saying it to you right now. I said it calmly. And by saying it calmly and saying it without emotions and just saying this hurt, that loved one was able to apologize for me and they were able to relate to me. And another moment I had like that, and this is even before, this is actually right before my injury of all times for it to happen.
Mhm.
It was actually the day of my godchild's baptism. I was sitting at the table with my friend's little boy and my friend's daughter, who's also my godchild, my goddaughter, and my friend's mother-in-law. And the kids are eating, and my goddaughter was shy of 2. She was like about like what, 20 months or so, like 19, 20 months. So she's eating, maybe a little bolder, but still under 2.
Mhm.
And she's eating a hot dog. And I know, and she turned to me and her cheeks are puffed and her eyes were wide. And it was that help me look. And my first reaction was panic and to call for my friend. And then my inner voice went, "Shh, you need to be calm for her. You're the adult." And I calmly pulled my chair next to her. I'm like, okay, baby, it's okay. And I calmly told her to spit out her hot dog. And then, I rubbed her back gently and then I watched her eat. I'm like, okay, we're going to eat and chew, eat and chew. And when my friend came out, I calmly said to my friend, by the way, this happened. She's okay. Like, this is what I did because my friend's an amazing mom. And she and her husband gave me like the biggest gift of all, asking me to be their child's godmother. And I I said it calmly because I love my friend and I love her children and I love her family. And I felt a responsibility to not go, crazy, crazy, crazy. But by being calm, again, we were able to communicate effectively. And my friend was so gracious. She was like, oh, thank you for doing that. Like, oh, that's fine. But it eased the situation. Like there was no reason. I mean, there are times I realize we're human, we're going to panic, but
Mhm.
it's another example where we have a choice to be calm. We have a choice to take responsibility, and I had another incident like that with other friends' kids where again, I chose to be calm. I chose to like, okay, how do we handle this? And there is something, and I believe that's what Fred Rogers does so beautifully, what he's doing in front. And again, he's human, I mean, like I know like his sons will say, he had his moments, too. We're all human. We're not always going to be calm. We're not always going to be perfect. But if we can exercise a sense of calmness when we approach situations, and at the same time, when I say this, there is a time to let the feelings out. There is a time to take a step back and be like, okay, I'm hurt. Like I was in a meeting earlier today and I was sharing something as one of my healing meetings. And my inner child came out and I got ragey, but that needed to happen too. So that's what I'm bringing this up because I feel it's important to recognize we need to let our feelings out. We do need to do that. But of course, there is a time and a place for it. And that's where this exercise of being calm, this exercise of working on our feelings and recognizing it. And that's what's happening in the books I write. In each of my books, Bella learns a skill or goes through a transition. And with each skill and transition, she experiences those range of feelings, and some of them are negative and some of them are positive. And in each book, she has a parent or she has another special adult character that helps her work through those feelings and give her space. And the irony of this is my coach Matilda, my editor Susan, my strategist Melanie, these ladies all do that for me with the development, what I'm going through in my business. Matilda allowed me space to discover I'm an entrepreneur. Both Melanie and Susan gave me the space to realize like I need to self-publish. And now as we're taking next steps in the self-publishing process, again, Susan and Melanie, again, they're still giving me space to figure stuff out. They're still giving me that room to ask questions. And it all filters back to what I was saying earlier about it doesn't matter what age we are, we all have feelings. We're all going through transitions. And if we can take a step back and give ourselves that relatability, we're going to be able to communicate with each other. And that's really what I'm going for in my children's series. And with each series, I have coloring books as well. Because when I illustrate, I always do a storyboard. And again, coloring, and my goal is through my books and my toys and the coloring books and the storybooks, is that these are tools for you to adapt to your family, for you to be able to adapt to needs of you and your child, how you can most effectively communicate with your child and be able to relate to your child, and not just your child, but your spouse, your aunt, your siblings who are aunts and uncles of your kids. Like it's endless, the tool, the way we can apply this if we open our hearts and open our minds. And that's my dream. That's really my dream with what I'm doing.
It's a great dream. So,
Yeah, thank you.
this is my least favorite part of a
Mm,
podcast is when we have to start wrapping up.
of course.
So, um, so I'm going to ask you one question from the writer's wheel of mystery. And so I'd like you to pick a number between 1 and 18, and I'm going to ask you a
Mm,
question.
mhm.
And then I'm going to ask you for a last word of wisdom or a pearl of wisdom.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think something that's really important is you have to tell us what your book series is called
Okay,
and where people will be able to find it. Okay?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can you give me a number from 1 to 18, please?
15, please.
1, 5?
1, 5, yes.
Okay. Do you have a motto?
Ooh, that's a good one. I I always tell people imagination, actually I do. Imagination is timeless.
Mhm.
If we have
Very Disney thing to
imagination,
say.
yep, if we have yeah, exactly. If we have imagination, we have a sense of faith. And the world is our oyster. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Like you do not, doesn't matter how old you are, your imagination never goes away. And you
Mhm.
always have a choice to open that door to imagination. And when you have imagination, you have faith. And when you have faith, you're able to release that sense of control, and you're able to acknowledge and trust in your higher power. And when you're able to put faith into your higher power, for me, my higher power is God. We all identify it differently. It doesn't matter how you identify it. Whatever your higher power is, when you put faith into that higher power, you also put faith into your sense of imagination and the possibilities. So it's really endless. So yes, I do a motto. I
It's a
do.
very long motto.
Yes.
Okay. Can you top that with a pearl of wisdom to leave with the audience before we get to talking about your book and everything?
Absolutely. My pearl of wisdom is don't be afraid to try. And what I mean by saying that is, I know, this is especially as an artist, when you create, 90% of what you create is probably never going to be seen by the outside world. And that's okay. And that discipline to keep trying and keep writing or keep drawing or keep testing things out will help you get where you ultimately want to be. My biggest example of that, when I started blogging, 90% of those
Mhm.
first blogs I wrote never got onto my website. But by writing and writing and writing and writing, I'm able to write a blog without batting an eye. And it's that mental exercise. And I say that lightly because for each of us, there's a different skill that we're probably going to apply it to. But it's that openness to keep trying, and that openness also to put it out there and let people see it. Because at the end of the day, you can always take it down. You can always take it down. And
For
that's,
sure.
you always have the opportunity.
So that perspective is very important. So,
Yes.
Kristina, thank you so much for being on the Dead
Thank
Man Walking
you.
podcast.
Thank
Can
you.
you remind the audience or tell the audience what the name of your book series is going to be and where they can find you and the
Yeah.
books?
Absolutely. So the title of my book series is going to be Bella Lucia, Tales of a Curious and Thoughtful Elephant.
Mhm.
And my website is my company name is Curiously Curated Creations of Kristina Lucia. And I will send this all to you in the show notes so that it's easier for everybody. My website is www.triplecokl.com. I will send you the link to my landing page for the freebie coloring drawing. And just so the audience knows, and also so you know, in case, depending on when this goes live, I do have other freebies for the season, like pumpkin freebies, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and whatnot. I will always include a link to the coloring drawing in the email you receive. So even if you type in your email on that landing page and you get like a pumpkin freebie or a Thanksgiving freebie, don't worry, the coloring drawing link will be in that email, I promise you. So I just want to say that to your audience. And I'm happy. I will send you show notes too to make it easy. I will send you my Instagram handle as well. I'm a big believer in email though, because I do send emails. Like I have a newsletter, which I love doing. And again, when this comes live, like I share things like podcasts I'm on. So like your podcast would be one of the things I share in that newsletter. So I would love to have people on the email as well. That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you again, Kristina. This has been wonderful.
Thank
This is
you.
one
Thank
of
you for
my
having me.
favorite author interviews so far, mostly because
Thank
I
you
barely had to
so
do
much.
anything.
Thank you for having me, Fred. Bella and I love being here.
You're welcome. Bella, have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye.